So my story is that in 1999, when I was 24 years old, my phone rang, and I was living in Maine at the time, and on the other line was my mom in Alaska telling me that my 21-year-old brother, who had been my only sibling, had died of a drug and alcohol overdose. So at that moment, when I heard that news, I was kind of catapulted out of my life as I knew it. You know, I was 24, I was working, going to school, dating, just kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And at that moment, when I heard that news, that life basically was over as well. A lot of things were over. My brother's life was over, obviously. My life as I knew it was over, and the family that I had had as I knew it, my family was gone. You know, my parents were there, but they were different. They were going to be different. I was going to be different. Everything was going to be different, and it was terrible. I ended up moving back from Maine to Alaska to be closer to my parents, and I lived with them for over a year, just kind of dealing with what had happened to all of us. So my life had kind of gone from, you know, a 24-year-old trying to figure out their way in the world to coming up with a mixtape for my brother's funeral service. It meant watching my parents in their own grief. It meant that the bubble of protection that I had felt before, without even realizing that bubble was there, was now gone, and that anything could happen at any moment to anybody that I loved. It was very clear to me what it would look like if I had died, because basically that's what it looked like. If I looked around me, my parents were devastated, our family and friends were devastated. So I didn't have to look very far to see what it would have looked like if something had happened to me and my brother was still there. So there were just kind of months where I hung out at my parents' house. I curled up into bed with them at night like a little toddler, because I was so scared and sad and anxious all the time. Eventually I started meeting other people that had gone through similar losses. I joined a grief group, and my mom and I spent time with some friends of hers who had both recently lost their husband. And it was kind of in that companionship of being able to relax around other people who, like me, their lives had stopped while the rest of the world kind of seemed like it was just spinning on. Our lives had all stopped in a really real way. And so through those connections with other people going through things that were similar, and through allowing myself to really feel sad and angry and, you know, all the stuff that kind of happens when we go through loss, over time I started to shift. You know, I started to change and figure out what the next step was in my life, and to realize that, you know, while I had mourned the person that I had been before, that there were going to be some really positive, amazing things that came out of going through this experience, that grieving and suffering in a way that I hadn't ever before really kind of connected me to human suffering, which we all experience. Unfortunately, I was experiencing it in an intense way at a younger age than most of the people around me, my peers at that time, but it's really a human experience, and through going through that, I think I came out a better, more compassionate person. The only advice that I would have to other people who are going through that intense part of the loss is just to reach out to other people. I remember how alone I felt at first, and how it seemed like cars were still driving by, people were still going to work, the world was still spinning, but my world wasn't. My world had stopped, and this horrible thing had happened. So I guess what I would say is, just when you can, find other people who are going through similar experiences. It won't take away your pain or your grief, but those connections, I think, deepen our resilience and in our lives. Thank you.